Welcome, guys. Iron Disciples. This is the first guest we've had in like years, I feel like, even though we've only done this podcast. I mean, we've had a lot of guests over the screen, but this guy's actually in the home with us in our studio. So we've had him on a couple times. David Gornoski turned us all on to René Girard's mimetic theory. This is shaking our world, and he's very good at conveying this in a way that will help you to improve your life. Now, a lot of the terms being thrown around today, they're sort of like academic terms, guys, and he'll be very good at explaining them. So take your time and listening. And I've been looking forward to this for a while, David. So I'm excited to actually have you here to pick your brain and actually get a little deeper.
Yeah, great to be back on the show and in person. So I think we're going to have a real fun time together. So where do you want to dive in? I mean,
well, tell us about what you're doing. I know a lot of these guys are, you know, they may not know your podcast, kind of your interests, stuff you usually dig into.
I host a program called A Neighbor's Choice, which I call an apocalyptic Mr. Rogers for adults.
I love that.
And so we've been doing that. We started off as a group, and we'd meet up, and talk about things. And
no kidding.
Then it turned into I wanted to create like a curriculum to develop for churches. And then I realized churches would probably be the last to adopt these ideas. So I just took it on the road to the public and started it as a podcast then. And then went on to broadcast radio with it. And I had done some radio earlier in my life. And so, but I was able to
get a voice for radio, bro.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful face.
For beautiful face for radio. You do, dude.
But I decided I was going to, take a stab at doing broadcast radio. So we took A Neighbor's Choice and put it on broadcast radio, starting off with WFLA Orlando, which is
awesome
radio in that area. And then we did.
Do you still do that? What time does it air?
No, we've moved on to online only. So
really?
I decided to. I was doing the broadcast radio thing, but then we did WHBO News Talk Tampa Bay as well from 5 to 7, which is a station that carries in this neck of the woods of Florida. But then we wanted to pivot back to, we had developed kind of a national following, and we realized probably it would be better to go independent for now and try the broadcast thing at another time, because it just makes it more flexible on schedules. When you have a live show,
you have to do it
5 to 7, Monday through Friday. I did that during the worst time in the world to be a broadcaster, because that was, we launched that and then we got the earlier time slot right when COVID was going on. So I had to be the broadcaster every day and keep a positive, happy face as the whole world was melting down and food was scarce. Remember, you'd go to the grocery store and
I was in California when that happened, bro.
Oh, wow.
Not a shredded toilet paper. The whole state.
I mean, same thing here.
Well, I imagine that must have given you a lot of practice, because I mean, you write very well. You're very, very good at, the verbal stuff. And so having that discipline to do that because I mean, we do a podcast once a week and still I feel like I'm catching up. It's hard to make ground, but doing it every day, it's like you get to practice that skill set and you become better.
Yeah. I figured, I thought of it like a business. The reason why I got into radio is I thought, there's a lot of people my age doing podcasts. There's a handful of people my age doing national broadcasting radio. Right. And I thought, well, if you show up, when all the old guys retire, you'll be the guy that's got the experience doing live radio, and you'll get the opportunity to be syndicated. And that's probably true if I stayed with it, but it's a little bit of a slog doing that, because, a lot of the programming directors and terrestrial broadcast radio are older. They want to retire.
Yeah.
They came in when Rush Limbaugh was starting in 88, that world. And so their whole model is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You're just looking for the next iteration of Rush imitator instead of, if you wanted to be like Rush, you want to look for something completely new, because he was a new sound and a new style for that time of radio. And they don't think of it that way. They don't think about there's not a lot of disruptive ideas in talk radio. And it's because it's a heavily regulated industry, by the way. So it doesn't really have a lot of entry coming in and creating disruptive
novelties.
So that's why all the fun energy goes into the world like podcasting and video streaming. But the problem with that is, since everybody can do it, it's hard to establish sometimes authority that if you're the man in broadcast radio during
you're that man.
COVID, the man on the radio said it. So it gives it a little bit of more credibility that's legacy built.
Yes.
It's the same reason why what Tucker did with Putin was effective, because there's a certain generational set that if they didn't hear the TV guy say it,
they would never get access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They would never even entertain the thought. If
That's
you
right.
said, well, a podcast said, or Rogan said that Putin's, not wanting to take over all of Europe. Well,
you can
I heard
tighten this thing right here like this.
Yeah. If you, there you go. If you said that, I heard it on a podcast with Rogan.
It sort of seems a little chintzy, right?
Yeah, because that's the generation they grew up with broadcast TV, and that was.
There's a lot of them though, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge demographic.
Yeah, and it's not just boomers, Gen Xers.
Still
some
listen to the radio.
Have a little bit of affinity to TV and radio, so we did that. But
it's really sad. As like looking at the music industry, there's a guy. His name's Rick Beato, and he actually talked about like music went through that same exact unfortunate situation. So like when Nickelback came out, all the producers were just looking for bands that sounded like Nickelback, even though they were different at first. And it creates this like just repetition, and people get sick of it. But then in turn, it caused all the labels to fail and all the radio stations to fail. Because back before, a disc jockey could actually find a track that he really liked and he could push it, which created more of an organic like community based on what song was good and what song was bad, So while it's more accessible, you can put your music up on any, streaming services you want. It's still in some ways more limiting, and it's interesting to hear that's the same thing for radio. It's all about personalities and what you focus on in that case, instead of like a sound for music.
Right.
But it's like, it sucks because people need to be exposed. And how do they get exposed nowadays? They either have to be introduced to it by a friend, or they have to stumble across it like I stumbled across you. Honestly, I was in my bed late at night, kind of looking through videos about Nietzsche. And I stumbled across Uber Boy, this guy, and I was like, he's a compelling speaker. The guy's a great storyteller. And then there's you. And I was like, my God, what is this René Girard mimetic theory? Like, this is blowing my mind. And the next day I typed in René Girard. I'm like, this is a Catholic French man. And I was like loving Jordan Peterson too. I was like, how come I've never heard him talk about René? Like, what's this going on? Like, I feel like he was being like purposely hidden somehow. Like my conspiracy mind is like, why?
But really, here's a good quick reason why René Girard stuff. Well, there's a couple things. One, Carl Jung, which is the basis of Jordan Peterson's stuff. He came from a different generation before René Girard, so he's had longer time to cook into the zeitgeist of our culture. Right. Number two, here's the bigger one, in my opinion. America is a therapeutic state. America's government made a choice after World War II to invest heavily in developing psychological, analytical psychology.
Yeah, like Juice Merlot. I read the book, the Rape of the Mind by Juice Merlot.
Okay,
he wrote that. It's basically about that. So after the First or the Second World War, all of the POW camps and the way the propaganda started to explode, and how to organize that to be able to direct and the population. So
they learned what they had an issue. There's a great article if you guys want to check this out. I highly recommend this for everybody in your listening audience to read the book. The article by Matthew B. Crawford at unheard.com. And the topic was the sexual revolution a government psyop? And it's probably based on that same book and other research around that, which they were having issues with the fighters, World War II pilots, the bombers. They were burning out when they would go and drop bombs on civilians en masse all over World War II. That was the new rules-based order that was being established with World War II. It's pretty heinous, like just carpet bombing, killing women and children and civilians. And they were having burnout issues with the folks. The fighters said, "I don't want to keep going." They would just burn out, mentally fried. And so these wonderful psychologists decided, "Hey, well, the reason why they're burning out is because they have repressed moral issues because they came from Midwestern." Christian, patriarchal, morally repressive or whatever. And we need to
morally repressive.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
They were saying that their Christianity was morally repressing their Like basically the guilt that they were having was actually attached to some kind of sexual repression thing. Yeah, this is literally what they said. So there was these crazy people who had really sick childhoods themselves that came up with this psychological stuff. And they said, well, if we can go back into their and deconstruct their patriarchal Christian religious upbringing and their values,
we can eliminate the shame.
Yeah, we can remake that. We can remake the soldier to be a killing machine. So that when they started that, they brought all these psychologists together and they created, Harry Truman it was like this big nationwide push to basically denazify the American public.
That's what it turned into.
Yeah. Wow. You remember Putin recently said his whole goal in Ukraine is to finish off denazifying Ukraine.
Yes.
Well, I think he's making he's winking at America's history under the World War II era. See, the World War II was the founding moment of the world order that we're living under.
Yeah, with the propaganda and the way that they start affecting people's minds, mass populations. Yeah. It's interesting how in the Putin interview, how he said, you guys have prioritized, sort of controlling the media.
Yeah.
Like, why is that? I mean, it's obvious. I mean, if you can have all the war you want, but controlling the narrative ultimately is what's going to be able to create either guilt, shame, a lot of these motivating factors, what people are going to settle on as far as like something that checks out for them is a reason why. Right. It's like, that's what people really want, because the confusion and that ambivalence, that's what kills people and it unsettles them. Yeah. They'll do anything they can to get into a place where it's like, I'm confident about this. Yeah. And that's why those voices and those steely gazes win over so many souls, even though what they're representing is complete chaos and evil. Juice Merlot talks about the sort of evolution between the World War I, vets coming back and they're like, oh, you're shell shocked.
Yeah.
And that was it. It's like, you'll get over it. You're shell shocked. And then it going to put PTSD and like the way that they made issues bigger by trying to help. And then when they saw it was an issue people paid attention to, they started to further use it as a propaganda tool. Right. Juice Merlot I think he was Hungarian Jew. And interesting because René Girard, who we're getting to, he kind of was like, with the Carl Jung era, and coming out of that, but also trying his best to look at the world and say, you had the industrial war machine, like a lot of these things they're like the next iteration of what's already been going on, but they presented differently, so we couldn't defend ourselves as well.
Well, everything we have still is a iteration of therapeutic state. The psychology field, and Candace Owens recently has come onto this. You should check out her recent work, where she's got the receipts and all the creeps behind Freud and all of his buddies, and the creepy stuff, the sadistic stuff, the things they were doing to kids. John Money was a sick man who created gender identity theory. He was messing with little twins, because he was trying to make them do stuff. And then we had the other guy, what's his name? Kinsey, that guy. He was a sick freak. A lot of sick freaks messing with kids that were the foundation of psychology and psychiatry. And they really became the hegemonic religion of America. After World War II. They were ascended to the throne. Now, here's what I'm getting to with René Girard. René Girard comes from the anthropology world. Now, anthropology has also been something hijacked into a leftist project, but anthropology, it's fundamentally a Christian vocation. You can't really do it without a Christian worldview underpinning what you're doing, because anthropology is dealing with the incarnate, the enfleshed, the physical, the world that is, and that was how, when Jordan Peterson and I had our exchange years ago, we were kind of talking past each other, because he was obsessed with, at the time, Kathy or whatever that lady was, who kept saying, but what you're saying is that guy. So he was stuck in that. But what more importantly, he was talking in psychological terms about what Jesus did. And I was trying to talk about it in anthropological terms.
Man, that hit me right between the eyes.
Yeah.
Because it's a disembodied Christ, right?
Yeah.
And when you'd say that, I was like, man, but it's like people like to talk about their problems more than they like to fix them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, you see that happening.
Exactly. And here's the thing where Jordan Peterson, and I'm not saying this as a criticism, it's just a fact that because he has a psychological approach to the story, we are in a therapeutic psychological religion in America. So his view of Jesus was much more tolerable to the establishment media
Sounded right.
to allow him into the zeitgeist of conversation because he could fit in the dialectic. Whereas I don't think René Girard, now they can try because there are leftists who take René Girard's work. So you can do what you want to do with it, but it's so explosive and because it's more accurate to the way the Bible actually is.
That's right.
That it's one of those really, if you let it go, it's going to undermine things.
Well, it's scary to me because like a lot of Jordan Peterson's, like he works very well for people that already have like you said, been sort of, they've been indoctrinated, like you said, the dialectic of this therapy, like it makes sense. Like it's a dialogue they can understand. René, if you come to his work, I think from a Christian background where you have all the symbolism in our worship and like, Christ died, the blood, like but you don't really get an idea of the anthropology, how it connects to you. And so it's scary because you're like, I'm being called, right? I have calling to this. And it kind of, for me, when I heard you describe it, it described Adam and Eve in like the human condition. To say the human condition from just like a secular, like this is our problem, it described what motivates that to me. So then I could like use that as a tool to find out how I was going back to these guys who are, organizing the propaganda to motivate you. It's very nebulous because you're like a scared person in the dark. You're like, I know that I'm hearing all this shit around me. This is bad, but you don't know where to point. You don't know where to run. So that's like a light. René's stuff is like a light to shine on that and be like, okay, what do you do now?
Once you see René Girard's work, you will understand exactly why woke and left and everything works the way it works.
Right.
And you'll understand exactly why you are keen to be motivated by the propaganda that comes from that. So it's a much more anti-establishment revelation because
it's the next
the
step.
Bible is an anti-establishment revelation.
Very much. Yep.
But not in a revolutionary sense.
Thanks for explaining that because people are like, well, what are you doing here? But like, so Jordan says to clean your room. Right. It's like, okay, be responsible for that. But then it's like René Girard saying you're responsible for doing this more specifically. So it's like, it makes it more difficult, but that call to responsibility is still within that.
And again, remember, Jordan Peterson's work would tell you, hey, clean your room up, bucko. Don't be such a victim. But, what René Girard is doing something a lot harder is he's saying, well, everything you know about yourself may be a little bit not original. And that's hard for people.
Very hard.
Now we're getting into the biblical revelation about who you are. So here's the thing you always got to remember. The Bible is presented in Christianity as oftentimes when you go to your church and everywhere you talk, in the cafe, everything is usually talked about as if the Bible is the study of God, right?
Theology,
right? The study of God. But if the study of God is all you have and not the study of man, then you don't got the Bible. You don't have Jesus. You don't have the incarnation.
It's a nasty trick, hey?
Right. Because you're detached from you're detached from the actual concrete changes in history that have actually happened as a result of the biblical revelation. You just take that for granted as like the march of history, as some detached humanist, secular, stupid myth. There's the myth. Myths always hide violence. Remember that. Whenever you have that's why René Girard called psychology and mythology. He said it was hiding the violence. He thought Oedipus complex and all this stuff. Freud was a sick freak, and he hung out with sick freaks. And what did they do? They did sick freak stuff. When you learn the truth, like Oedipal complex, that like people have an issue and some kind of like fetish for their mother when they're young, that was their justification of what they were doing to kids.
Because they wanted to,
they were doing stuff to kids
themselves, so that they could say
they were trying to say, well, all kids wanted and all this psychosuppression stuff. It was all a giant attack on patriarchy, on the father. What we are dealing with in America is a revolutionary religion that hates the father, because the father is the foundation of the Christian worldview. And what we see in its place, this attempt to try to have this kind of mutated, distorted matriarchy, which is really ultimately witchcraft, right?
The witch.
So it's the opposite.
Witch. Yeah.
This is C.S. Lewis stuff, right?
Well, that's what you see with feminism, right? We see the symptoms of all this. Accruing with the eliminating the power of the anthropology in the church to make the men weak. You're never going to get outside of that. If that's what's going on, the families are going to suffer. The kids will be stolen. The ideology is death. You're going to have death of so let's go to René. Okay. So will you briefly describe, like, people know mimetic, like they know the mime, the guy who's like, copying to copy, right? But how does that, let's connect this to the human condition. So like Adam and Eve, the first story that we really most will learn in the Bible in Genesis is Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Can you tie that in for us? Like describe what occurred with the Girardian theory, like
Eve,
tying that into it.
Eve was, Adam was supposed to be the leader. So he's supposed to make any kind of encounter with something new, or going on the edge of the garden or going to the next frontier. That should be led by Adam's leadership. Well, Eve was copying Adam's leadership when she decided to go and deal with that fruit issue.
And that is mimesis, right?
That's mimetic. So she was copying and desiring to be Adam.
Because she desired the power Adam had.
She desired that sense of autonomy.
That sense of autonomy.
Which was not real autonomy, because in reality, she was governed by the prohibition by God.
So her freedom was the prohibition of God. So the deception was that if I have the autonomy that Adam has, then I'll be more free.
It's like the hot stove. You tell the child, don't touch the hot stove. And they're like, well, I want to because you told me not to.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the same thing. You're still mimetically governed, even though you're doing the opposite of what the other, in this case, God, says, don't do that. And then she's like, well, I want to do that. So first, there's a desire to copy and be like God.
Yes.
Right. So there's a mimetic.
Satan, right? Yeah. Really exhibiting the first one, right?
Well, yeah, I guess if you want to go there, Satan's got this trap here, and on that level, he's desiring to be like God. Well, he's in more and more. He's desiring. Some people believe Satan was jealous of humans because he didn't believe such a dirty creature
would be so close to God,
could be elevated to such a high standard. So he hated that. And so he was, he was jealous of them. Right. So there's mimesis all over the place.
So there's positive mimesis, like I want to be like, and then there's,
which is what God was giving with his creation. He was saying, like, look, I want you to be like me. So I am going to give you some tools that are going to help you mature to become one with me.
Right.
And this is what it looks like. Don't touch that right now.
Right.
Now, and then so she says, well, I want to be you the shortcut way. So I want it more. And she also,
and what's the operative word? There's desire, right?
Yeah, desire.
So mimetic desire. So they're desiring something that's not good for them.
Yeah, and so she thinks the desire comes from her own heart, but it's not. It's been suggested to her.
It's not authentic desire, right?
Yeah, it's been suggested to her by the snake. So you think you want a car, but you don't really want it. It's suggested to you by someone that you really admire.
That's right.
Right.
So
you think you want X amount of followers, but it's been suggested to you because you saw somebody on Twitter or X that has those, and you think if you get that, then you'll be wealthy enough or renowned enough.
And that causes what? It causes dysfunction in your spirit. Now you don't have enough.
Yeah,
now you're lacking.
And what happens in that case is you end up actually worshiping your neighbor as a kind of demigod, because
interesting. I never thought of that.
Because they have exactly what you lack.
Want. Yeah.
So from your perspective, they've got it all, and you've got nothing in comparison.
I've heard a lot of pastors say when you covet, you're guilty of idolatry.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So they kind of run together, where it's like the coveting leads to idolatry.
Right.
So
that's the same as mimetic desire. Coveting is a negative version of mimetic desire.
Yes. And that's really important to understand. Like when you first come upon, I think we're more inclined to focus on the negative issues. Like when I started hearing you talk about mimetic theory with Uber Boyo, it was obvious to me that I was like thinking about all these times where I'm inundated with marketing tools, advertisements, seeing stuff in school where it's like, that guy has a nice pair of shoes, now I want that pair of shoes. I was totally content and fine until I saw those shoes.
You saw the Donald Trump, the Trump shoes?
No.
Did you see him?
No, I didn't.
You haven't seen his sneakers?
He's got shoes
now?
golden
shoes, yeah.
That's hilarious.
Golden shoes for $400.
Trump made these shoes?
Yeah, probably Skechers or something.
This guy knows how to tune it up.
Yeah.
I love him. The golden toilets, golden shoes.
The problem here, René, see, mimetic theory helps you understand everything. The reason why Donald Trump is so scandalous is because in a world so run by mimetic desire, he's flagrant in his mastery and leaning into it. And you're supposed to hide it. You're always supposed to hide it. René Girard says that envy is the greatest taboo. Pride may be the greatest sin, but envy is the one that no one wants to talk about the most. People talk about pride all the time. There's pride parades, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's, I got pride. racial pride, all these prides people have.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to talk about envy. I have envy
No one
for
does.
that other
Yeah,
group.
that's true.
I have envy or they have envy for me. You're not supposed to say it either way, right? If you say, oh, that person's envious of me, that makes you look too puffed up in our culture. And if you say, well, I envy them, that makes you look like weirdo or loser or something. So you're supposed to hide that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But that's why
that instinct is so revealing, isn't it?
Yeah. But Trump is more flagrant in his playing with the mimetic arts, and he plays with it. That's why he'll take like Omarosa and put her in the White House, because he knows that she's like really wired in a very mimetic competitive way, and she'll be in fighting with everybody else in the staff, and he can find ways to harness
the mimetic
rivalry in a way that gets him something. But I don't necessarily think that's the healthiest way to do an organization.
So like Donald Trump calling out Hillary and making all these nicknames for people, right?
Yeah.
They respond, and that's negative mimesis. He still has control over the situation. He's still the one directing, even though it's not like I want to be like Donald. Right. It's like something he did. Now I'm responding to that in a negative mimesis.
It flicks you and it annoys you, right? And it's just like what you do with like copycat game on the playground, and the cop, you keep saying everything the other person's saying.
You piss him off.
And you piss him off.
It becomes sameness.
It
The sameness gets to you.
It's annoying. Even just me doing it right there, you start to feel that old school childhood irritation kick back in.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Yes, you do. See, so you don't want to do that, right? So you hide that, and you're always trying to hide. We are to keep our sense of self. We're always trying to hide how much reciprocity, which is just that mimetic feedback loop. We're always hiding that, right? So like if we have,
but it's built into the church, right? And this is where I feel like we as a church can benefit so much from understanding this, because it's in our gospel. It's everywhere. But like we have these social conventions and all these things that end up defining us as just church attendees and brothers and sisters, where the envy's there. These hidden things are still there.
Yeah, and the scapegoat's there.
The biggest thing is the scapegoat, right?
Yeah, the pastor ends up being oftentimes the scapegoat or the music leader. There's like rivalry between them. Who's bringing in the crowd, the music leader or the pastor? And there's rivalry there.
Well,
and then the pastor's presented as a god, and then they make a scandal or sin, and they're crashed down as a scapegoat and expelled.
Right.
And then, but because it's not a full scapegoating, because maybe they had some sympathetic friends. Then they go with them and they start a new church. That's called Protestantism. That's what it's endlessly creating new churches.
Brother.
And they
have their own little popes in there, their own little pride about which doctrine they pay attention to.
But I want to give an example about the reciprocity of desire. So if I gave you a pen, let's say this was like a really fancy pen or something, and it was your birthday, and I brought you this pen in a little case, and then like the next time when it was my birthday, if you bought me like pretty much exactly that same type of pen, just maybe a different color,
I feel like it was a weird gift. Yeah.
You would be, if you got it, I'd be kind of like, what are you doing? Are you making fun of what I gave you?
Yeah.
What's going on here? So it wouldn't be well received typically. But if I give you a nice pen, and then like next time you give me a Porsche, I would feel, oh my goodness,
it's too big of a gift.
You've shamed me because I just gave you a pen, and now you've given me a Porsche, so you've humiliated me that way. Now you can't go the other way either. You can't go like if I give you a pen and then next time it's my birthday, you give me a napkin. That's disrespectful too. It's too low, right?
Yes.
So it can't be too close. Can't be the exact pen but a different color. It can't be too much high, like you gave me something way better, and it can't be something too lower in value subjectively. It's got to be something slightly on the same value but different enough that it hides the reciprocity of the ritual called gift giving. You see,
that's the calling of the church, right? Is we're all have a specific anointing where we have to be different enough, right? But we all want to be the same pen,
right?
And then that differentiation causes us to scapegoat on people, fracturing the church further. Because we don't have the balls to go figure out what God has anointed us to do. We prefer to be all the same little gold pens attending the same church until that becomes so incredibly, like we were talking about, repeating something becomes uncomfortable. We have to break it with what? We break it with what? A scapegoat, right?
Yeah. Or the therapeutic, going back to the therapeutic culture of America, which is really heavily influencing most of church and all the different forms. That there's a kind of, everybody wants to be a rock star in their own mind. But it doesn't work out that way. And so they develop a victim narrative as to why they're not a rock star, right? Conservatives have victim narratives, liberals have victim narratives.
It's kind of like you were talking about Freud. You know, they have to create some kind of narrative and make it justify. Yeah,
but that's just a calcification, a kind of like a concentration of all their mimetic resentments that they have towards all the people in life. Because it's not just that you're rivalrous or jealous or envious of one person. Oftentimes it's a collection, it's an amalgamation of people that you then end up calling white people, or you call the patriarchy, or whatever it is that you've been implanted to hate as a scapegoat diversion from the human sin, the human nature, right? That is what René Girard's work does. It gets you to look into the mirror, because it's ultimately treating the Bible the way the Bible should be read. That is not just a study of God, and a study of mankind. Where did mankind come from? Why do we act the way we do? Why do we have so much conflict? Why do we fight more? If we have seals, if we watch elephant seals, those vicious animals, have you seen them?
Hell yeah. Things tear apart sharks, dude.
Face.
Yeah.
But they typically, once one of them has been defeated, the alpha male does not go for a fatal strike. It's usually the dominance and submission of that exchange is enough to stop the contest. But we are not the same way.
No.
We're petty. And if there's dominance and submission in a human relationship, if they don't finish the final blow, that person that submitted may come back.
Yeah.
He comes back with resentment and gets a band of people together and kills that guy.
Yeah.
And then whoever saw that guy get killed, his family and cousins and buddies, they go get a party together, and they come back and they burn the village of the guys that killed their guy. And then whoever survives that burning of the village, they grow up and they remember, oh my gosh, our village was destroyed. And there you have foreign policy. It's just endless reciprocal vendettas, right?
And that's not our calling as a church.
Yeah.
Right. We're not supposed to be doing that, involved in this pagan sort of retribution cycle, a cyclical cycle of violence and blood, which is just another way to scapegoat. So you're scapegoating, you're killing people instead of.
But why is it that? Why is it? Here's
why do they want it?
Well, here's why is it that we're so caught up in so the vengeance cycle is a little bit different from the scapegoating, because remember in the ancient world that murder had to be directed in a way that wouldn't create vengeance. So it's precise.
Wasn't that like them wiping all the Canaanites out? Like the Cosa Nostra is like, we'll kill all of the kids, everybody's dead.
Yeah. Or the Amalekites or whatever. Yeah, that's a big thing right now that Israel's invoking, that they have the right to kill Amalek, is the Gazans. They literally, Netanyahu quoted that scripture.
That's messed up.
That's
bro.
Amalek. But everybody's Amalek when you need to take some territory, property. Everybody comes to Amalek. And so that's not going to be really cutting it in the New World Order of Jesus Christ. He's playing by Jesus's rules now, and it's not going to work. Sorry, it's going to backfire. But I don't care what the television says. That's true. But I want to go back to this revenge thing, because here's the thing. We have revenge, right? We do have revenge, but revenge obviously has been contained to some degree, because otherwise, if revenge was the only way in which we dealt with our rivals, we wouldn't exist anymore. So there had to be a way to safely channel that mimetic rivalry that goes tit for tat. So it starts off this way. I insult you on your show, and then afterwards, when I go to shake your hand, you pull back, and I say, wait, this guy's mean to me. I came into his studio, I didn't do anything wrong, and all of a sudden he won't shake my hand. What's his problem? Did I say something that triggered? And then I give a little rude gesture back at you. Then you say, well, that confirms why I didn't shake his hand.
Yeah.
Because he said something in the conversation that was rude. And then then he reached out to shake my hand, but it wasn't an honest handshake. It was a disrespectful, sarcastic handshake. And so I didn't give him a handshake. And then he gave me that ugly look, which confirmed to me that I was right, that I have been the insulted party, right?
Yep.
That's mimetic rivalry.
It's the little golem inside of all of us, man.
But we all have it. And we do it all the time at traffic. Someone pulls out, you're trying to murder me. How do you know he's trying to murder me? How do you know that? You know?
Exactly.
Or whatever it is, we're always looking at that reciprocity. But Girard says is if we're not like animals that know how to stop.
Yes.
If that revenge just goes out of control, we would have been ceased to exist.
That's right.
So we have to look in the record of human culture to see any clues as to how we dealt with runaway conflict. And what he pieced together like a detective working through history with the Bible as his decoder, looking through the mythology. It's like a special lens. You put it on and you can see the truth of mythology.
Yep.
And what you see is that it looks like we have this common pattern of what he calls human sacrificial rituals.
Pagan thing. Yep.
Which all humans did, including the Israelites. They did it all the time. That's their whole problem. They couldn't behave themselves. They kept falling back into that. Again, we all have a little Amalek in us, and that's why it's not good to use that as a justification to murder everybody's kids. Yeah,
right.
We all have it. But that's the difference. We have a Christian worldview that puts that all of us have fallen short of the glory of God, and not some group is like extra special.
Yes.
And the rest of the group are like that's the ethno-narcissism of all pagan religions. By the way,
we're better than you.
Is there something a little extra special? Like we're all equal, but God made us a little more equal than you guys. Like we get a little extra special.
And you can see that built in the Old Testament with the Jews being the chosen people. You know, their dog. Anybody outside of our bloodline is a dog or a pig.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like the thing that shook me when I was 24 and I was re-encountering the Bible was the understanding that there's grace, there's forgiveness, right? And none of that is something that you deserve,
right?
So like in order to end that negative mimesis, which like the pagans reinforce, and we're always trying to find a way to make it better through sacrifice or finding somebody to sacrifice, you forgive, or like you have, and then you copy that. You start to mirror the anthropology of Christ, what he did. You know, he subjected himself to the consulate, being perfect, to a corrupt consulate that wanted him dead, and he did all these things because we were supposed to mirror that, right? We were supposed to. That's positive.
He didn't do that as a passive act of pacifism. He did that as a proactive dismantling of the whole machine.
But coming from the pagan viewpoint, which is might makes right, you see a loser God, right? Like the Vikings were like, why is your God hanging on a cross? You know, why is
that's what Gnosticism does. A lot of the old Gnostic versions of Christianity would deny that Jesus even was on the cross. They often say
they didn't like that.
They would say that he tricked somebody and put somebody else, some other bozo.
They couldn't tolerate that. I mean, you even see that in the
Nietzschean, the Hitlerian Christian Gnosticism.
Yes,
posits just that Jesus was too much of an Uberman.
Couldn't
he,
be,
he snuck out of there and put some bozo on there.
This is ridiculous. It takes the beauty.
That's fitting but see, they don't want to go there, but that's very fitting for a therapeutic Jesus, right?
Isn't it?
Because that therapeutic Jesus, that psychologically in your mind, you can make that be anything. I will have my hero's quest and murder all the kids in Gaza. Oh, how did you get that one, Mr. Peterson? You can't do it that way. It doesn't work that way. You don't justify murder. Jesus is the king of history. And he's not an idea. He's a human being. And he has set things in motion that you can't unwind, and you can't turn it back into an abstract idea. And I don't want to pick on him, because so many theologians properly in the church already for decades have that same mindset of like, well, we can kill all these people here because of an idea.
It's imperialism, right? Like it's a paganism that like we're tacitly pagan. We have to admit that we haven't accepted Jesus' propitiation because we imitate the state. That's that mimesis, right? But that's how we can organize ourselves. Like if you can have the eyes to see that mimetic, like is that coming from the gospel? Like what's compelling us now as a church? We're going after these Amalekites? Are we Amalekite? Like you have. It's a difficult thing.
Do you treat your worship leader like Amalekite?
Right? Is he your God?
Is he your Canaanite? Is he your Hittite? Do you worship him? Do you worship your pastor? Do you build him up bigger than he can fulfill?
Right.
Are you leaning on him and his full-time job to do the work of the church that you should be doing in your own day, every day?
Right. It's a hamster wheel of never enough too. You know, at the side too. It's like you're never going to be compelled by a sort of mimesis. You're never going to find fulfillment in that.
Yeah, because it's salt water, drinking salt water to quench your thirst. That's what desire is. It's endless because it's not from you. It's what you borrow from those around you. And ultimately, the desire is a desire to be the other.
Yes.
Because the other represents something about the nature of who we are, which is that we are interdividually shaped. Just like the Trinity is interdividually oriented. It is one God with three persons, and that familial relation, that it's a family relationship in one being. How is this possible? How is it possible? That's the mystery of the whole world. But that's who we are. We are a human being, but we are drips and drops of all the desires.
It's a frustrating part
Right?
about being human, right?
Right.
Is you can't nail down exactly what you are
Yeah.
in terms of like, what are you, bud?
Yeah.
You know, it's like that's what
I mean,
causes people to want to scapegoat into these little comfortable Mises
Yeah,
holes.
and that's why they fight on Twitter about who's
Yeah.
got the special church, because that is their way of trying to objectify. I've got Jesus in my pocket,
Mhm.
and therefore I'm in the special team.
Mhm.
I've got the golden ticket. I'm going to the factory.
I
And
feel
it's
like Christ
no,
was, when he was on the mountain, you know, just like praying all night long. Like I feel like he was encountering that, because it takes so much. You have to be dead set to go and look at yourself in your church and just be like, I'm nothing in terms of what's authentically me. And the gospel that I've been served for so long is this social convention, a Western church social convention that's allowing me to get, you know, abdicate on my responsibilities that are gospel. Right. But the sad part is it's liberating, and you feel good when you're walking in the anthropology of Christ. You know, like you do feel better.
Yeah.
You feel authentic. You're no longer playing the same pen, sameness, you know, like little Oreo cookies coming off of the, like that gets old after a while.
One-upmanship and keeping up with the Joneses, and always never happy with, you know, trying to get whatever it is that you do more smarter than the other person, stronger than the other person, wealthier than the other person.
Like if you could just put that away, like if you could put that away, those keeping this the whatever you want to call it, like I'm keeping tabs on all these things, you know, and they're all moving together. That's insults. Exhausting, bro.
Yeah.
It just kills you.
Yeah.
You know, before you know it, you're responding. You're being controlled by it, right?
Yeah, but see, that's what therapy culture does. Is it says go to counseling and talk about all the things your parents did wrong.
Yeah, dude.
All that stuff. It's always oriented at scapegoating the father most of the time, you know. So all these women go to, because it's therapy culture again attracts women because it's a more female way of dealing with it, where you're constantly, you know, like, because women, their brains tend to have a long-term, they have better long-term memory than male brains on average. They do. It's like, I just did that study that showed evidence for that. But they hold on to every little thing and every little memory from every little. And so therapy is a feminine way of, like, overly in a bad way, dealing with problems that the church should properly be dealing with. Right.
I couldn't agree
more.
So
all these words that they use, like gaslighting or light gas, I say it's light gassing. Is what they're doing to us. All of this stuff is designed to get you in that therapeutic state of mind. But what they don't realize is the people who taught them those words are the ones gaslighting them and lighting them up with gas more, because they get them on a vegan diet. You can't be lit up with more gas than that. So first of all, they're gaslighting them on that. They're loading them up with omega-6. They're giving them omega-3 flaxseed oil. You see women going to Whole Foods and they're guzzling down flaxseed oil. That's what creates cellulite. Dear God, you're drinking that thinking you're going to get a beach ready body. You're getting cellulite just coming out right after you guzzle that flaxseed oil, because it's literally something that turns, I had a guy on, it turns into a plastic polymer. And that's why it looks like that. Being obese was never supposed to look like that. Cellulite stuff, that's something new. It's a modern plastic polymer type thing that takes place when you eat these omega-3 flaxseed oil. And that's what everybody on Instagram's doing.
That's probably one of the best examples of mimesis too. It's like you're watching a video or like a movie, and some guy opens a bag of chips, and you're just like, man, I'd love to have that. Or he bites into an apple. Like, I would love to have that. We actually had Joe T-Will on, and he was talking about the conspiracy. Like, and I love having guys on who are actually willing to say, yeah, like there's a huge agenda to make you sick and ill. You know, and the culprits that are making you sick and ill are not what they're telling you. Right? They're trying to give you all of the anecdotes and medicinal foods. The health food is worse.
Regular food.
Oh, just normal food, bro. Like, let's just take it at that. But you're absolutely right. So, I mean, what I would like to do at this point is, like, so these guys can kind of see this, like, mimesis can be positive and negative, right? So you can have like a positive form of mimesis, which is ideally what you'd see in the church, right? It's us actually not just taking our gospel as a theology, saying God is very, very interested in men and how they will act when they've taken on the correct form of mimesis, meaning they're I am taking on the identity of Christ, the best of my abilities. And in loving a church that's able to differentiate all of the members in a way where they're not having that pressure to be the same, you know, and be that comforting little same blanket, right? And then you have the negative mimesis, which is the hard one to find because of, like you said, the root of it being in envy, right? It's like the small parts of us that are inclined to hide it, right? And so in your experience, like when you found it, how did you, as a way for the guys, like practicality, like we know that our diet is one of the easiest ways to connect to mimesis, right?
Yeah.
Like you grow up in a family, they serve a certain kind of food.
Yeah.
That's your comfort food. And you can kind of see like, well, this food, why am I eating food? It's a building block for my body. I need to treat this as a fuel. Like my relationship with food is toxic. Like I'm looking at it completely wrong. You can see for people, I think food is a good entry level for identifying some of these things. So it's like school, right? Like beginning in school. Like why did you want some of these? Why did you identify the way you dressed with certain things, right? You start
why did you dress like a goth when everybody was wearing country western?
And you thought you were being different, you were rebelling, but you weren't.
You weren't.
Man. You're actually just doing because you didn't.
If you go up in a red county and everybody's saying, "I'm not taking the vaccine," and then you go and take all the boosters,
right?
Did you do it because
you
really wanted it, or did you do it because you wanted to signal that you weren't those other people around you?
And that's the difficulty being like, am I being authentic? It's
because
a hard
people are
question.
obsessed with social status.
Yes.
And women are very keen on social status. They're more cunning about social status than the average Joe or John.
They're hypergamous. I'm John.
I don't want to pick on Joe since he's not here.
I feel so bad for the word Joe. It's like average Joe. Well, his name is Joseph. Yeah.
But you know, they get picked on. The women, I say I'm going to write a book. I'm thinking about writing. I always say this and I never do it, but I'm always talking about writing another book, but I never write the first book. But
you do a lot of writing though. You write a lot of articles.
Put it all together and just make it a book. But I want to write a book called "Why Women Suck at Voting," and it's just going to outline exactly.
A great title, dude.
Don't steal that idea, anybody.
No. That's David's, bro.
Yeah, it's going to talk about basically like the reasons why they get predated on because they feel the vibe.
Well, they're the most mimetically inclined. You see that with the story of Adam and Eve, right? They take the bait, bro.
In a different way. In a different way. They are more passive aggressive in how they manifest it, right? That's why they'll get together and they'll say, "Oh, how dare you're like morbidly obese. How dare he say you're morbidly obese? Keep eating your cheesecake, Sally. Just shove another cheesecake in your mouth, Sally. Why is your friend telling you that? Maybe she wants to make sure that Sally stays as her big obese friend that she can always measure herself by. But you can't hear that when you're so obsessed with your feelings and that vibe of, oh, yes, this is a cheesecake and I should eat another giant serving of it, even though I'm morbidly obese. No. She's trying to destroy Sally so Sally can be perpetually her little fat friend that she walks around in and says, "Oh, God, don't worry what they say about your body size, Sally. You see that morbidly obese mannequin? Looks just like you, and it's just fine."
It's messed
and
up.
Then
dude.
they're over there, you know what I mean? They're over there, smaller, skinnier, and they're saying, "But there's Sally.
I'm better than you.
I've always got Sally." Who's Sally? The demoniac from the Getter scenes. Remember the demoniac? The demoniac was the crazy guy stoning himself. And they didn't like it when Jesus healed him.
Because he was their
was their measuring stick. He was their obese Sally.
I loved when
he's their obese Sally.
Explain that, because that was one of the I love that. Yeah. So one of the stories of Jesus coming over, right? Yeah. And you'd expect him. He heals the demoniac, and you expect you get that weird point in the story where you're like, why aren't they happy? Jesus, healed this weird guy in the hills, cutting himself, and they're like scared. Get him out. Explain why. Because I mean that nobody really.
And look what he does. He gets them to say he goes to the one town that is a pagan town in the whole story of Jesus. The only time he goes to a pagan town is this land called the land of the Gerasenes. It's on the northern part of the Sea of Galilee. I was there. I saw the little cliff, and I imagined all those little pigs flying off of that. I was like, how the hell did that work exactly? It wasn't. Now, I have to give a little bit of pushback on the Bible. The Bible makes the Sea of Galilee, at least in our imagination from our child. I'm going to push back on the Bible. Yeah, you think it's this big sea, and it's a bit of a pond.
Like, what the hell?
It's a beautiful pond. It's a big pond, but it is a pond, but it's big, I guess. And there's giant catfish because they don't eat catfish over there. So those catfish get so big, and they look like they could swallow Jonah.
Scary,
yeah. But anyway, so the land of the Gerasenes, right? So you go over there and they show up and it's like an action movie. He just walks right up and the crazy, the
crazy man,
the demoniac, and he's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, I am Legion, right? So he announces his name as the military might of the Roman Empire.
That's crazy.
So so Jesus in another way is saying, look, he's already proclaiming that this guy is possessed of the imperial mindset. Right. Like in fact, when you watch this, when he says, when he sends them into a herd of pigs and those pigs fly off of the cliff and die. Right. Go look up the symbol of the Roman legion. It's a boar.
No
it's
shit.
a pig. Yeah, this is a political text.
Dang.
This is not just Jesus is a meta performance artist. He's doing stuff in real time, and then you write the text about it.
That's
and that
awesome,
power,
bro.
you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, whoa,
Yeah,
this
dude.
was a real story. And then you see there's like layers to this stuff, you know? It's really cool. So it's a total rebuke. He's rebuking if it's the same spirit of today. It's the same spirit of flaxseed oil, you know? Who are you? And he encounters a morbidly obese person who thinks that they're in a state of health because they've watched the TV imperial mindset. And they say, I am beautiful. And it's like, that's the spirit right there. Boom.
Mhm.
That narcissism, or whatever it is, you know,
Mhm.
or it's, you know, I recently debated a young lady named Tina, who was a CNN correspondent on my show. Didn't go well. She's been suspended, by the way, from her job at CNN. So we'll have to have her back on because she's got no work, and I don't want her going out on the street. So we're going to bring Tina back on. But, you know, Tina made a point on my show where she talked all day about our democracy. She talked about our democracy. That's the legion.
Mm-hmm.
That's the brand name.
Mm-hmm.
So if this story was written today, it would be like Jesus walking into a city, New York City, and he encounters this demon, and this demon is like, and then Jesus is like, who are you? And he's like, our democracy.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a second. Well, that's what the text is saying about the Roman Empire. And you would have seen that if you were in
those times.
Context. You would have known that symbol is this boar. And then you would have seen where he's like, okay, there's your boar. Now I'm going to send you straight into the pigs. And when you go into the pigs, you're going to fly off the cliff and die in a sea of madness, just like the Roman Empire died after they took on him as their new symbol and replaced the boar with Christ on the cross. And then they disobeyed him. They didn't fully fulfill the covenant, you know, the obligation of the power of the cross, and it destroyed them.
That's so
he whooped them.
Yep.
And people don't get it. They think, oh, that was a defect of Christianity.
No.
It's an obligation that once he's got his hooks in you, you've got to follow him. That's why he says to Paul, why do you kick against the pricks?
Yeah.
Meaning you can run, but you can't hide. Once I've got you, once I've got your society hooked into the revelation that what you've been doing is wicked and you can turn from this, you can't run. You've got, because it will, the more you run with that advantage, this is the brilliance of what Jesus does. The more you are exposed to the gospel, it demystifies your paganism, your superstitions, and then you become more technologically and wealthier than the communities around you. And then when you use that advantage,
because he expects you to serve,
right? Exactly. Right. But when you use that power differential to then exploit them,
you're going down.
The victim got the revelation of the gospel has already infected you such that it's going to destroy your efforts to keep that leverage going.
That's brilliant, brother. That's brilliant.
And that's what the sign of Jonah was about. I mean, Jonah was told to go to a pagan land, and he goes to a pagan land, and he doesn't want to, right? And he's telling them to repent. That's the only sign that Jesus says. He says, the one sign I'm going to give you is the sign of Jonah, which is going to the pagan world and telling them to repent because God loves you too.
I like that because most of the time they're like, well, 3 days in the belly,
right? They don't
sign of resurrection, but there's so much more. Like you said, there's different facets of this. God's vocabulary is 3-dimensional. Like it'll mean that, but then this too. So back to this guy, right? Why did the village come out instead of being like thankful, like, hey, Jesus, thank you so much for getting rid of our crazy person in the hills? Why did they want to keep the crazy person? Because
he was their measuring rod for who they were.
Like Sally and eat another
because
piece
they
of
were
cheesecake,
they were possessed by the Roman imperial mindset, and the Roman imperial mindset needs a scapegoat to function.
They don't.
So when Jesus encounters a little town, that town is representative of all the towns around the world, including his own, by the way, but in a different way. So it's like a little it's like a little metaphor. It's a real life story with metaphorical layers to it, because what he's showing is like, okay, the way this town functions, it has a Grinch. Like the Grinch is a story of the demoniac, but in that story, they kill him. They don't, I mean, it doesn't say they kill the Grinch, but if you look, they have a big feast with a big giant turkey looking thing. I think that was the Grinch. Those Who's, they wrote the story from their perspective.
It's messed
They're
up,
a bunch
bro.
of freaking Gerasenes, and you didn't know it.
Yeah.
Because the winners write the history of pagans.
There you go.
Right?
Right.
So the winners write the history. So the Who's wrote the story about the Grinch. And the Grinch was not, he may have had problems, but they had some problems too, and they don't tell it.
Yeah.
They make it look like they're a bunch of innocent, perfectly wonderful people.
The victim is guilty.
Yeah. And they make their victim look guilty.
Mhm.
But you didn't hear his perspective because he didn't write the story, because he's a roasted piece of carcass at the end of that book.
So this leads me to
they have a whole ritual too.
So you talk about in your podcast the way, and it's really great. I like the language because it's like you've been infected, right? Like there's no cure. You've got
Christianity infecting you.
And you say like it's haunting you. The cross will haunt you. Yeah. It's kind of like you're in a house.
That's why women feel the vibe more.
Right. Okay.
Because they feel the vibe, so that's why they get keyed in on the victim propaganda.
And then you have like this therapy thing come because they're haunted by it, so they need to create something that resembles that. And you say in your podcast, like the liberals, the Dems, they're kind of wanting to mimic, but also twisted version of our faith, right? Mm. So you see that happening now in our world. So we have these great examples, biblical examples of where we see this mimesis, the sameness, the idea that we need to keep our scapegoats. When you look at the United States today, how it's haunted by the cross, these different things are occurring. The church itself is kind of wrapped up in this. How do you see it? How do we enforce this in a way? Like what
enforce what?
Like we get obsessed with doctrines and we kind of scapegoat on our doctrines. Like you see very often churches will be like, they're obsessed with the rapture, say, right? Like we're going to get out of this, right? We have God coming to save our butts. But then it's like, what are you really called to do? What parts of the gospel are we abdicating on that's damaging the anthropology?
But they have a Gnostic or dualistic approach, right? Because they are about winning souls, but the body is kind of going to the birds, right? And so is the earth. So I say, if you've watched I saw Time Magazine had a whole feature story in the checkout aisle about the evidence for the afterlife. And I like that stuff too. I've had those people on my show, doctors that study the near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. And there was a recent movie by the people that did the Sound of Fury or whatever.
Yeah.
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom.
Called After Death, which was a documentary about people who've experienced near-death experiences and come back and tell these interesting stories. And this doctor I had on, he talked about this little child who was blind from birth, and then they drowned in a pond, and they explained vividly the feathers and the textures and the colors of birds.
Wow.
So they could see, and they didn't even know what seeing looked like until they got to see when they left their body.
Yeah.
So these are wonderful stories that are interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
But what's interesting about this is that I'm never content with a victory. I'm always wanting the next thing. And I think that the return of the belief in the afterlife is going to be hot, but we've lost our belief in earth. See the difference there? That's again a Gnostic therapeutic culture that does that, which is
explain that a little bit.
Let me explain that.
Yeah.
It's kind of related to the dispensational. That's just one version of it. But there's this idea that the whole point of Christianity is you say a prayer, you do a ritual, you join the right church, or you do this or that, and then you're in the team, and your soul's saved, but you would die, and the planet Earth will be burned by fire, right?
Apocalypse, right?
Right.
Yep.
So it's all going to hell, except for hopefully your soul is going to be like rescued. So you've got your body, you've got planet Earth, and that's material, and that's all just going to hell. And then you've got your little soul will be plucked out like Casper the Ghost and thrown up into heaven if you say the right prayer or join the right church or do the right type of baptism or work your way to salvation. They all have a version of it. Every church has
Gnosticism.
A lot of them have thoughts righteousness. That's why I tell my Calvinist friends, they're always about, don't have any works. And I'm saying, what about your thoughts? Because if you say that I have to have the tulip, that's a thought I had to do to get that righteousness. It's a kind of mental thought. I'm just saying.
No, I love it. Yeah.
But anyways, I don't.
Well, it's like a Gnosticism that's built into the church. Like you brought up some of these ways. Like if you were to label it with a disease, which is kind of what I'm driving at, right? Because I want to do some of the hard work for the church members. It's like, are you the church like garrisoning? Like we think we are the Jews, but we're actually this Gentile city that is wants to be Roman. Yeah, and we are haunted to the fact where we are not going to have success through those means. Like we will be the pigs going off the side of the cliff if we're not careful. Yeah. So acknowledging some of this, I'm just trying to make it easier because you're very high level in your thinking in terms of like you've come to terms with what's already happened, like
Yeah.
what you've already went through.
Yeah.
And so the scapegoating, like in the church, is what allows like Gnostic pagan themes to cause our trajectory, no longer Christ anthropology, we're pagan anthropology, right? So some of those things, I was just giving an example, like the doctrines can be a scapegoating mechanism, right? The wars can be a scapegoating mechanism. Like we're looking at them as Amalekites, like you said, or Canaanites, when really they're not, and you're saying the world can be like when you're too sold out to, I'm going to wait on this rapture, it's going to save me. Like, are you really, is that what Christ did, with his anthropology? So I'm just giving more examples to the listener who's trying to wrap their head around what this actually is.
It means like
for us in the West. I mean, I don't know about other churches.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, here's the big picture. I want to fire you up with the big picture because I want to paint such a beautiful feeling and reality in your heart that you don't know exactly what just happened, but you are thrilled and you're like fascinated, and it's got you thinking, and it's got you dreaming big and getting in this. Because that's the best way to do it, is that I want to step back here. I want people to understand something I call beliefism. Let's go back to this because we use these words Gnostic. Let's use a simpler word, beliefism. What is beliefism? This is a word I made up. I don't know what it means except for what I think of. Beliefism is this idea that like the belief about something is what it is. Now, some people might call this nominalism, but I don't want to go. That's a philosophical term. Try to use like basic things, down to earth stuff.
Yeah.
So beliefism is the idea. Let me give you a metaphor. Like Thomas Jefferson, he existed, right? He wrote the Declaration of Independence, and he did these things, and he had a big hand in shaping the founding of our country and the ideas, right? Beliefism is the idea that's like, if you don't believe that Thomas Jefferson existed and that he did these X, Y, and Z actions, and that he wrote these things and he said these things and he impacted this and that, then it doesn't affect you. Like what he did does not actually like impact your life. Now that's absurd, because whether you were taught Thomas Jefferson or not, or taught what he did or not, or believe the right things about him or not, his actions in life, if you live in America especially, has impacted your reality around you.
Yeah.
Your assumptions.
Whether you believe it or not. Right.
And I want you to understand that now about Jesus.
Yes.
So see, I hope this translates to the metaphor for the audience, is that beliefism has infected, again, we're using fancier words like Gnosticism, but to bring this down, beliefism is the problem with the church and our society.
Yeah.
Which is, if I believe about Jesus, that's my access point to receive the effects of what Jesus did in the world. Do you see how that's a therapeutic approach? Do you see how that's in the mind, the psychology? That's in the mind. It's not in reality. Because in reality, Jesus affected your world and how you think about the world and how you have government and how you have songs and how you think of your career and how you think about choosing religions. He did all of these things, whether you believe anything about him or not. Like, he's objectively governed and functioning through the world, his movement. So I say, if he was merely a man, this is the greatest miracle in the world, because you are swimming in Jesus's fishbowl. You're in his sandbox, whatever we want to use. So everything you are is existing in relationship to what Jesus has constructed in history, that he said he would construct, which makes you believe he's more than just a man, because he said he would do this, and then it's happened. And he said humanity would act this way in response, and it's happened. He said that mother would be against daughter, and daughter would be against father, and father would be against son. That's what we're seeing right now. We have people on TikTok screaming and yelling about their dad being a deadbeat dad. And then the deadbeat dad gets on and says, actually, we gave her millions of dollars. And I actually did everything I could to be there for, so we're seeing, people losing their sense of who they are and their gender. They're losing a touch of their if they're a female, their female anatomy betrays them now. Now I'm disconnected from that. So it's not just father against mother. It's now like yourself against your body.
I heard you say something interesting where you were talking about, I guess, the product of this therapeutic sort of culture we're in is that you all become the same, and then people will start to want to differentiate in more obscure ways, sort of like when you have a severely urbanized population all of a sudden you have problems with people feeling like men, or like they get more and more weird the way they try to differentiate, right? There's no purpose in it. There's no faculty in it. It's not really doing the world any good. It comes from a place of like severe pride where it's like, I'm going to differentiate in such a weird, useless way.
Yeah.
And now society has to pay attention to me. It's like, and then what causes the attention to flow and continue flowing is the fact that that person needs validation because of the therapy sort of, you know. And then it's like you're the good person.
And that's why like podcasters all sound the same, because they're trying to mimetically react against the idea that you care, because caring shows that you're low status. Right? If you're low status, you're like really excited about something. I'm not excited about something. I'm just above it all. I'm too cynical. I'm just above it all. I've seen it all. There's nothing. This is this lie that we're at the end of history.
Very sad.
That therapeutic psychology culture has created. Number one thing we could do to destroy this would be for people, if you want to do politics,
this is good,
to pass a bill in the state of Florida, start with the state of Florida, since that's where we're at, pass a bill called the Marriage Emancipation Act. And what this would do would be to privatize the terms of marriage covenants again, so that people in churches that have real credibility and ethics, that actually want to protect families, would be able to create covenants outside of this one-size-fits-all public contract, so that they can't just exit with alimony and child support as some kind of stupid leverage over because they looked at the pool boy or the pool girl or whatever.
What do you think? What do you think? I love that. And it touches a nerve for me. This is kind of going off topic here, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I guess it is kind of like us taking back our birthright, which is, I guess, what we want to do if we want to really get away from the social conventions of the church that are pagan mimesis. So there's a bunch of sacred things that the church have, right? These are our sacred, this is our birthright, the underpinnings of our birthright. And one of those things is marriage. And so we were talking about theonomy with a few of these people on our podcast, and trying to figure out what's going on with this, you might say, militarized, Christian guys going out. Like it's exactly what you feel like with the Canaanites and the Amalekites, but even worse. It's like it's really tense. And this theophany is like, we're going to make the politics and apparatus of the church, So I had a thought, and I wonder what you think about this. Like, if the church was to take back control of dealing with like marriage, the sacred things, the sacred institutions, like you were saying, I believe that's kind of what you're going at, right? No?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying private institutions, period, which would open up the church to step up and make some sound contracts that protect families.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Like so it would be the market force of watch and see who's, all this game about whose religion is supreme. You'll find out real quick when churches can set the terms of the contract, because then you're going to see which churches are legit for protecting both the male and the female and their children, and not allowing easy exits for stupidity or flights of feeling or whatever it is. That's the number one thing that would destroy the therapeutic culture, because that will gut the foundation by which they have leveraged to destroy the family. Going back to World War II, they designed, this is literally what the psychologists were brought in by the United States government to do. They took the same thing they did to Germany during Reconstruction, where they were trying to reconstruct German minds, and they were trying to take the Nazi out of them, right? Instead of using, they had a spectrum. They would do like a quiz based on, like, you would take this survey. This was a foundational survey they've used in modern psychology departments. This survey, in the German version, it was, and it was like, based on how conservative your upbringing was about differentiation between gender roles. If you got a high score, meaning you were conservative on gender differentiation and things like that, monogamy, all the chastity, all these classical Christian values, that the higher you were on that, the more likely they would say that you were a fascist Nazi. Tendencies that needed to be psychologically brainwashed out of you. They took that same frame and they gave it to the Americans as a nice thank you for, winning World War or helping to win World War II.
Wow.
So that's what our government did as a nice thank you. They said, oh yeah, well, we learned a lot about your psychology, that you guys didn't want to murder all these kids in cold blood and all the bombings in Europe. So we're going to just as a nice thank you, destroy all of your families and your grandkids will suffer through hell. And they're going to think that gaslighting and lighting gas and all this stuff is the way you're supposed to talk about relationships. That's the framework. And then your religion is this little side thing you do if you're into that little niche.
Yeah.
But it's kind of backwards and stupid. And it doesn't have any teeth because the government has the monopoly on the marriage license contract. That's not the way it should be.
No.
That would be the number one thing to gut the entire therapeutic state. And states can do it right now. Do they have enough guts? That's the question. If Christians and churches understood this, they would do it. And this is like a wedge that would hit the entire foundation of the therapeutic state. Because once families are protected and once children are protected, now we have some breathing room to be real again, to be realistic again, to be normal, healthy, joyful.
Yes.
And because you don't have to have this stupid therapeutic state that has basically leveraged families and monetarily incentivized people to destroy children over emotions.
Yep. And if so, we've abdicated on those responsibilities as a church. We've given the government, control over our sacred things. These are sacred things.
They have no right to touch that.
Right. But we want, and the theophany is, let's take control of all. It's just take control of church stuff. Take control of the stuff that's going to give us, so we don't have to scapegoat on wars. We don't have to feel like we have to earn back this responsibility through means that are horrible for our health as a church, through war, through politics, through all these things. How much work and attention would it take us to get marriage back, to handle divorce, to handle all those things?
Instead of trying to fight all these other things, focus all your attention
on that,
all your fundraising, all that, and put it on that one bill.
It's like
Ron DeSantis or probably Matt Gaetz would be in there by the time.
It's like the hubris.
Matt Gaetz is going to have to deliver on that. He'll be governor of Florida. He's going to have to sign that bill. Now, the question is, they got a lot of these guys that are a little bit liberal when it comes to being Republicans. Will they have enough guts to even introduce the bill? But if they have enough pressure and the churches understood what's at stake, they could realize this will gut the very foundation of this entire assault on the church.
But it's not a sword or a machine gun, so they don't see it being as powerful as those different things, right? Just like, but the people who rule, they know. Just like Mike, we got the Germans got Margaret Sanger's, the thing with all the races, what was going on in the early eugenics. And then they took that, and then there's full circle. They give that back to us, so they can destroy families. I mean, it always comes down to the family unit, right? Yeah. It always comes down to basic relationships and the way that it should be formatted so that we can get some of the exciting stuff done, right? Like the Tesla stuff, the stuff that's really just fun and cool, living in a great world.
Yeah, but we're going to have to do that regardless of whether we get our rights back, because
no, I don't think it comes in as like a chain of consequence.
It would be easier to do it though.
It would be a lot more fun to enjoy it with more than 10% of the church say. It'd be great. Potlucks of people all enjoying it. Singing songs about this stuff. That would be great.
We need potato chips that are cooked with beef tallow.
They're selling them at Detweiler's finally.
Is it beef tallow?
It's either tallow or lard. And it's an old chip company, bro. It's like they haven't changed
we need to bring him on here. Bring that Amish man on here right now.
He's
here. Bring me your chip.
Titus. Yeah, no.
We're going to work together. I want to sell some beef tallow chips because that's what, I want to hit them. I don't see, that's the problem with the health community. I want to hit them right where Homer Simpson is, Give me the archetypal Peter Griffin, Homer Simpson. What's Homer Simpson eating? That poor, dejected man who's drinking beer, made piss water for Bud, whatever. When you're drinking this horrible stuff, eating these Lay's potato chips, that's literally turning him into a female, making him deformed in his body, creating just horrible
disease,
horrible effects.
Every single thing.
Diabetes, cancer, heart disease, psoriasis, schizophrenia. Dear God, the list continues endlessly. These things, all these diseases existed. What seed oils did was took them as indie artists and made them #1 Billboard chart, charting platinum, triple platinum selling diseases. That's the way I say it, because someone will always say they had cancer before seed oil. I'm like, yeah, there's like 1 out of a billion.
Yep.
They didn't have a lot of it, man. It was, and there's these things are not like you eat seed oil and that's the only way.
Well, I see why you want to hit
they trigger it. They create inflammation.
I see, and we need to talk about that. But I see why you're saying like the Homer Simpson, right?
Yeah.
Because like
I don't want to give them. So Homer, we save Homer first.
That's right. That's it.
Because that's their biggest victim. The guy who's told he's a piece of crap because he exists. He works his tail off. He's kicked around. He's stolen from by the government. He's stolen from by inflation. He's destroyed. He's dejected. He's told that he's a horrible human being.
Mm-hmm.
If he's black, he's told that he's basically the only thing he can do is be a pet for rich white liberals to use as like Pokemon to throw. Hey, I choose you, and they throw them at the election. It's pathetic. These people are pathetic what they've done to people. They've shrunken their minds, shrunken their ability to have dignity anymore because we live in the hellscape of Gnosticism, of beliefism. Jesus is not a beliefism. He created the best of what we see around us. The reason why we have air conditioning is because of Jesus. Not because he magically made it from the sky, because he inspired people to have the ability to have honest contracts so that people could innovate and say, hey, let me figure out how to create air conditioning and then sell it and have an honest contract with it without a bunch of, marauding pillagers stealing it and killing it.
It's not just, capitalism, right? It's more like, and one of the things you said that I really liked was when you go to a movie theater, you see the handicaps all at the front. Like, why is that? Have you asked yourself why that is? It's because of Christ haunting the United States, haunting your world. That feels good, but that's not something you'd ever see in any other society, right? So it's not just capitalism. It's these things put here to enhance your lives for the sake of Christ. Can you think that way? Is it just about
if you were
more
back,
dollars? Or
if you were Jesus walking down the street saying the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
Yeah, but he's meeting people at their material needs.
Yeah.
Right? He was meeting them where the Homer Simpsons where they like, you want a better potato chip, bro? Do you want a better do you want a better beer to drink?
Yeah.
Or
can I get it at a price point that you can afford? So
right,
it's not $15 for 4 ounces.
Right.
Dear God.
Because it's like the top
Homer's
down.
gonna be homeless.
Homer's
but it'll
be
healthy,
Yeah.
Better. A good tan.
In the end, it'll be better. But like the top down is like a hubris. It's like, we're going to go fight these wars. We're going to top down do this stuff. But it is accessing the Homer, which is like the family. It's like saying, look, we have so many needs the church could fulfill that are exciting if we choose to do it. The energy's there. The resources are there. But it's going to take us working in harmony. It's going to take you looking at the guys in your church that are smart, that are sort of been differentiated, the black sheeps, and saying, how can we use these guys to affect church better? Not mimicking like the Taylor Swift show where we're worshiping our worship leaders. Like we're trying to redefine our paradigm here.
Yeah. And let me tell you this, the secret for men to learn how to lead is to learn from women. Because women, now this is the irony, we have been taught to imitate the negative mimetic, the mimetic examples that women sometimes we could point to, like being too caught up in emotion. But women are the ones that tend to vote more leftist, right? And the leftist vibe is more closer to Christianity.
Yes,
you get it?
Mm-hmm.
So the right tends to be more masculine, and it tends to be very missing the boat when it comes to aesthetic.
Right?
And because the right doesn't look at the vibe of the West as a haunted mansion where everywhere you look and every mirror you open the cloak over, what is that called? The cloth they hide those. Yeah. You pull that down and you see Jesus there. And all of a sudden you see Jesus hiding from Jesus. Yeah. You see Jesus everywhere. And we don't say it's Jesus, but you see Jesus haunting every aspect. Now women, because they feel the vibe more than men, typically, they feel that vibe and they're very sensitive to it. So when you parade for them a transgender person, they're like, dear God, this person in recent in like recent history and then like the imagined rest of history has been a source of being persecuted because they're differentiated, right?
Makes sense, dude.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I want you to learn how to think like a woman more to learn how to lead a woman. You have to
makes sense.
And here's your red pill. That's what red pill people say. The alpha males are actually more in line with women's way of thinking. Actually,
you
that's
have to understand
they easy conversation. They have fun with them. Whereas the beta male is trying to like go in this opposite direction and not play in that world. Now, can everybody do this? No. But everybody has a way of doing this. Somebody can do the seed oil free potato chip. Somebody needs to do this in worship.
Yeah,
somebody needs to do this in terms of like speaking out against every little thing you can imagine, but more importantly, providing a solution as an alternative to the things that are wrong. We need anti-gravity. And I'm going to keep saying this because I don't care. I know that this is something that people say, what does this have to do with anything? Every time I mention anti-gravity technology, they say, my God, you sound like Klaus Schwab. And I say to them, Klaus Schwab is a cheap ripoff of Christianity. So the fact that I'm sounding like him means I'm actually recovering the original purpose and the intention and the feel and the vibe of Christianity. You see what I mean? That's what we're supposed to do. But women are in tune with the vibe culturally. aesthetically, and they feel that. And so they end up getting predated by psychopaths who know that. And they're always cranking up narratives. Look what they did. They trot out little.
They weaponize their compassion.
Yeah,
right?
Look at little Greta Thunberg. They trot little Greta Thunberg out with her little pigtails. They say, "Hello, how dare you? How dare you?" And you can just see the little creepy psychopath oligarchs hiding behind this little girl. Get him. And it's all a ruse because she's just a shakedown for them. They're billionaire oligarchs. They murder more people. They're the ones that wanted the Nord Stream pipeline blown up, which is the largest explosion. You want to talk about gaslighting? This is heavy gas. This is explosive methane blowing up, the largest methane release in world history. And those people are gleeful for that. Jeez. That Germany is out of this access and that the whole planet. And these are the same people behind what Greta was all about. Now she's going off script now, so she's in trouble, but she's a useful puppet that's used her just like Biden. They throw those guys out to the pasture once their little useful puppets are done. But women have to be talked to honestly about this and say, look, you guys are the best at the vibe. But the psychopaths know that, and that's why they're selling you on these lies, man. They're exploiting your best attribute and turning it into a liability. And you've got to be aware of that and be understanding that when they trot out some gender confused child, most of gender dysphoria is caused by seed oils. Go talk to my friend Dr. Kate Shanahan. She points out how seed oils are the things disrupting people's connection to their neurology,
body. And in the neurology too. But so I want to point out something that's become apparent, like the way that you're interpreting the Bible stories, the way you're interpreting politics, the way that you've built for yourself this structure to be able to look at things and be able to call those out. That's liberating. And a lot of that has to do with you being able to identify the scapegoating that's going on and the mimesis that's going on. That's what helps you to, because it's not just that you are a smart guy, but you're using these things to your advantage so that you can not be led around. You're no longer the puppet like the women are, right? They're saying men are. Well, men are, right. Well, in your example with Greta, say. But men, Greta, we definitely are. That's the whole problem with the church that we talk about quite often is the feminism, right? But the feminism is just a masculine. They're taking our masculine. It's masculinism that's in the wrong hands, right? So it's like, how are we enforcing this? How are we using this? And this is a great example for the listeners as they're hearing your analysis, how it's taken apart, politically speaking, biblically speaking. Those are the forces that are helping you to separate, like the sword coming down, the meat from the bone, to say, like, that's why these women have so much trouble differentiating what they should be compassionate for and what they shouldn't. Because
all the men say is, facts don't care about your feelings. That's not stupid, how you deal with that. What you have to deal with is say, okay, let me deconstruct the mythology that these psychopaths are using to make what appears to be a slain lamb when in reality it's a dangerous, violent gorilla named Tina. And that's the point, is that's what we have to deal with every day with every bit of their propaganda. Exactly. We've got to take and deconstruct it and show, because if you look at the book called Revelation, it starts with the Lion of Judah, but then it does a double take and you look back and it's the slain lamb since the foundation of the world. That is the archetype image of the world. And that's what rules both. Look at what's going on right now. The biggest conflict in the world is the Gazans versus the Palestinians versus the Israelis, right? Both of them are completely owned by the Christian narrative. They have to operate under it. Now, are they obeying it? No, because God is a respecter of free agency, but they still have to operate under the terms that Jesus set, because they have to go and present that they are the ones who are the most victimized. The battle between the Palestinians and the Israelis is a battle between who's got the more slain lambs than the other. That's what the book of you want to know what the Revelation book is about? It's right there. You're seeing everything come to pass, not in the stupid. This is where it gets weird, right? Because there's the stupid version of it that's always looking for a blood moon and a green-orange tint to the sun. All that stuff is the dumb, low-resolution, like parlor trick version of what I'm talking about. If you understand look at what Daniel, it's everywhere. We could go forever on this. Look at the story of Daniel when he has the vision of the different empires, right? The foundational piece, right, is this feet that are mixed with sand, with clay, right? What is it? It's what material? Iron and clay. Yeah. So iron. Yeah, that's your story. Iron disciples. So iron and clay mixed together, And then it says like a stone is thrown and it breaks it apart. The stone is the stone the Buddha's rejected. The stone.
Love that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the stone, here's what I'm saying. The clay part is what we say is a symbol for humans. So the reason why that last empire is mixed with iron is violence, domination. Clay is humanity. So Satan has to imitate the slain lamb more and more, to the point where the empire that he constructs at the final age of this historical battle is so slain lamb infused that it's going to break at the stone hitting it.
Yes.
And that's where
you see that coming so close.
Yeah.
Rachel Willis told us about standpoint theory.
What's that?
So in the 1960s, I guess most of the who's who at Harvard and such, they decided that history was written from like the pagans, like from the winner's side.
Yeah.
So standpoint, you got it pulled up, Mikey? Yeah. The way she described it was that it took the side of the victim, right?
Yeah.
Can you read that, Mike? Okay. You want to pull it up?
I can read it.
Standpoint theory proposes that authority is rooted in individuals' personal knowledge and perspectives and the power that such authority exerts. So I guess they take the standpoint of the victim. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cheap ripoff of mimetic theory.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you see that clay, like you said, Satan.
Look, it's even got feminist standpoint theory and indigenous standpoint theory. How about just the human is indicted theory? We don't have that one yet. See? They can't do that one.
That's right. So that theory is what gave them the platform to change and allow Satan, I guess, from church terms, to accomplish having more slain lambs, right?
Yeah.
So then now we can really control the narrative based on this victim.
But it's not just people plotting in ivory towers how to do it. What's happening is it's a reaction to what the gospel is doing to deconstruct ways in which, so feminism as a thing doesn't happen without there being a real basis of pain or exploitation and the power differential between men and women.
Well, that's what she said, Rockefeller.
Right. Yeah.
He's like, this wasn't done by women. Women didn't want it.
But what I'm saying is that it's not like, there's always, though, a basis, is what I'm steel manning the opponents. There's always a basis of real pain and suffering that goes into the foundation of a new reaction to the gospel approach. So, you've got the gospel, but men are not at a point where they're really realizing the female perspective. And if they don't realize it, at some point it can create power differentials in a way that is not becoming of Christ, which then opens up that half truth. It's not the full truth, because some of it is, propaganda and distortions and lies by men speaking on behalf of women, right? Making it look like they needed this thing. Yeah. But at the end, there's always in other words, Satan does his best work whenever he uses a foundation of at least partial truth.
Partial truth. Right?
So something has to be exploited, and that's where he says, see, we can't do it the Jesus way, because Jesus offers mercy, grace, and forgiveness. And that's just going to give carte blanche power to the tyrants. See? Yeah. So that's why with the civil rights movement, it couldn't just be a reconciliation between neighbors. It had to be, we have to go to DC. And once we go to DC is going to put in their violence and their revenge and all that, which is going to create this horrible, destructive pattern, what we have today, with HR departments running corporations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could never get anti-gravity off because you'd say the wrong pronouns or something. Can't have that. Energy too cheap to meter? No.
It's been disordered. Yeah, completely.
Yeah,
man, that's heavy. I got so much, in terms of and that's what I want to get the guys to understand is like you have to put this into action, right? It's easy to take slogans. It's easy to find comfort in scapegoating on the responsibilities that God has put there for you, right? Like that's the easy part. And getting rid of your scapegoat is getting rid of a lot of the stuff that's intensely interesting, sort of like your spare time shit that wastes you during your life.
Yeah.
So it's a call to bear your cross, man. Yeah. Ultimately, it's a call to understand that the book that you love, that you say that it defines your life, is a story about men, not just a story about a disembodied theology that causes you to be comfortable in your place and just be same as everybody else.
Yeah.
It's a call to action, man. It's pretty heavy stuff.
And it has a specific ethic of nonviolence that is through the entire story. And that's why the Petersonian approach of it's just an abstract thing in your head oftentimes does not abate the violent approach that people end up justifying.
Still got that bloodlust, man.
Because that's where, okay, we can make alliance with this group because of whatever reason. No, man, this is a new world order. Jesus is the king. And so that's why they have to play by his rules. Because again, remember back in the Roman times when Jesus was walking the earth, if there was a dispute, Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Hamas in 2018, he said that Hamas is an asset on the world of public opinion, because that's why they funded them so long, because they were funding them for a long time because they were the more rabid of the varieties of politics there, and they wanted to fund the Rottweiler so that they could show, hey, look guys, we need that land because look who represents them, this bloody Rottweiler. Oh, okay. Wow. And we paid for that, and Israel paid for that, and then it came back at them. Now,
it's so good. You need to see things this way. You need to create a system of thinking that allows you to see this. Otherwise you're going to be led. You're going to be the little puppet, and you're going to be constantly unfulfilled and angry at something, looking for your next scapegoat, because you're still mimetically playing to the pagan drum instead of the Christ incarnation.
And the scapegoat won't create in the old times before Christ. The scapegoat did actually create lasting peace and structure and order.
Yes.
But now, because he broke it, it doesn't create that. So whenever you scapegoat, like scapegoat men or
like the Roman Empire,
whatever, it's not going to create the same ordering stability that it used to. So it's like a drug that you've OD'd on. It's not going to give you the release, and it's going to just give you nothing but withdrawals. And that's what we're going through right now.
That's good.
We're going through this massive scapegoating withdrawal period. And what happens though is that what people do when they encounter René Girard's work is oftentimes they focus on, okay, let me see how I don't scapegoat people now.
Right. It starts basic,
but
right?
But it's actually harder than that, because where we're at is not so much about the scapegoating as much as it is the endless mimetic rivalry. Because now without the scapegoat, I
feel that's why the church doesn't work together. That's why we have Protestants with all these different denominations. Like it's endless rivalry in between doctrine, which they feel is more important or interpreted this way or that. And then you start to have some pathos for the Catholic Church trying to control marriage, and you see some administrative issues that are going on within, and it just causes you heartbreak, and you can be Homer Simpson as a Christian sitting there just feeling broken, because it's like, well, what do you do? How do you do this? They become demoralized.
Politically, we need the Emancipation of Marriage Act at every state level, and it needs to pass. So figure that out and get in your community, get your church to get involved with that.
That's excellent.
Personally, stay away from the seed oils, and get rid of all of this, these toxic influencers that are getting people to eat all these like garbage health foods that are just destructive, just as bad as the regular food. That's why Donald Trump is attacked, because he normalizes like filet-o-fishes and stuff, because you're not supposed to like say you eat that if you want to have high status and be wealthy. You're supposed to pretend you can eat that.
Dude,
filet-o-fish
is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Let's just
he promotes
double
that.
fish fillet.
But that's an example of why
tartar, baby.
That's the example of why he's hated those, because he eats these low status foods that the like the peasant class is supposed to eat but not talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so get rid of the seed oils, because that causes mental disease, mental health. It causes bipolar problems.
And your spiritual condescension, right? Like
stay out of debt.
Stay out of debt.
I would not buy a house. Do what you got to do. If you do have one, take care of it, I guess. But I'm just saying, like, try to stay out of debt as much as possible, and don't buy brand new cars. Try to have no credit score. Just don't even have a score. That's I don't have a credit score. I'm when they look me up, it's as if I've come out of the woods, like a guy living in the forest. But I've been able to work with people of all sorts. I've been able to work with homeless people. I've been able to work with, I've had prostitutes on my show. Didn't support their work, but we learned what they were going through to realize maybe not imprisoning them is the best way to solve this problem.
Just like with the drugs.
We have drug dealers on the show all the time. We have all kinds of people. It's an apocalyptic Mr. Rogers
Well, David,
for adults.
that's what
It's everybody.
David, that's why I like
Yeah.
what you're doing, man. And I have so much respect for your podcast and the content you focus on, because people don't like hearing, hey, don't have a credit score. They don't like hearing about anti-gravity.
Yeah.
They don't like hearing that they have a responsibility to be different in this world as believers.
Yeah.
You know,
and not different in a superficial sense.
No. Like authentic, different. I can't even say the word, but yeah, authentic version of that is your anointing. Do you have the balls to go find out what your anointing is? I mean, it's just basic terms, but there's real results there.
Yeah.
May not be what you have, that house, the suburb, and all these little things, the boxes you check, and then at the end of the day, your son or your daughter can't defend himself or herself in school against basic ideas.
Yeah.
Like, do you have the balls to homeschool your kids, have hand-me-downs on all the best, newest stuff? But then your kid could be like a real force of nature in school, change minds of other kids he's around. Like, that kid's unstoppable.
Kids can learn. I mean, kids can learn mimetic theory. It's something you can approach.
I think that's like you said in our last podcast. I think that's the best age to teach them.
Teach them
right
when they're
kids.
If they're watching a show and there's an advertisement, teach them that this person is trying to take money from you because they want you to buy this object. So the reason why they're making it look really cool right now is because they're trying to get you to give them some of your money. But if we give them all of our money, then we're not going to have any food or anything. So there's a way you can.
Why do you want this? Do you want it because so-and-so had it?
Yeah.
How did you feel last time you had something you wanted?
Yeah.
When do you feel your best, son?
Yeah.
When you're working, when you're doing something good, when give is to receive, right? Kids understand that. And then it's like, we don't have to do all this work as an older adult. Like, you have the amount of instinctual, like your knee-jerk reactions, getting rid of those, that's hard work, man.
Yeah.
You know, that's what your church has to undo a lot of these things, man. And
churches need to make movies where you have you depict transgender people in a way that Jesus would. Now that's controversial for people, right? Because Jesus, see what I mean? Like, let me give you an example. So, like, that Super Bowl ad that was saying he gets us, that with
I didn't watch it. No, what happened?
Well, there was I saw the ad. It was about these Christians, and they were washing the feet of all these people, but they never showed anybody really who was in the MAGA world or the conservative world being humanized either. It was just one way direction. So that's exploiting the gospel aesthetic in a way that is still keeping the dialectic going. We have to break through the dialectic. So homeschool your kids, teach them about mimetic theory, teach them that when you do copycat stuff, that's going to cause conflict. When you do imitate, if you keep imitating, eventually you're going to have fighting.
Rivalry, you're going to have violence.
If you're dating this girl in high school, are you dating this girl because you really think she's great, or are you dating her because you think that she's popular and it'll give you status if you date her?
One of my biggest,
or vice versa. For
one
the
of
boy.
I was in second grade, man, and all the guys liked Danielle, right? And I remember I went to all the guys. I was like, actually, Sylvia, she's the hot one. All of them focused on Sylvia, and I got Danielle. Second grade. If I would have had somebody to tell me what that was, to understand what was actually going on, I would have been able to affect progress in the way that I can interpret gospel so much better.
Yeah.
And ultimately I want guys to read the word and read the story of the crazy man in the hills and be able to get more than just God healed the demoniac or Jesus healed the demoniac, like this very surface level, feeling of that's what I get, and there's so much more to be encouraged, to be just like you said, excited by when you understand these things. And ultimately it's a faith builder, because you're like, yeah, he is God, no wonder he can talk in these ways. There's so much more here. But so that was an awesome discussion, man. I love talking about these things because it's this incremental progress that we have to sort of, like you said, don't expect these things to blow up. Be content with smaller progress, and don't have spiritual condescension with people in the church. If they're doing something good, encourage them. If they're different, encourage them, but also go do your own thing. And if you can help them, help them.
Yeah.
If you see somebody who's sick because they're eating seed oils or they have a horrible diet, because if your idea of confrontation is always negative, try and encounter that differently. Ask them questions. We had our good friend Joe on, and I was asking him, because he's in fitness, and I was like, how do you encounter somebody so that they can't scapegoat on you as being the asshole who told them they're sick, and so then they can continue being sick and just call you the asshole. And he's like, well, I ask him questions, and he said something brilliant. He's like, I'll say, how do you think your health is interfering with you carrying out the gospel? and then they're forced to ask the question to themselves and then answer. And so there's ways to encounter confrontation in the
and
church.
don't go the see, here's another thing. Don't go the dialectic opposite of, be seed oil poisoned and embrace it.
No,
Because the other opposite is where men are so obsessed, they stay in the gym so long,
no,
they're obsessed with what they look like, and then guess what?
yeah,
Who cares about what they look like more than women? Men who are at the gym too much.
We're at the gym,
which
too
means
much.
they're too
Dude,
womanly again.
God,
now you're just like, you're
brother.
upset. Oh, this girl will marry me if I look at her. I heard that somebody said this is the smartest person. Very smart guy, and he said, I'm taking this thing that might kill me to lose this last 30 pounds.
Metformin or something?
I don't know what it was.
Jesus.
It's a terrible thing. He said, it literally might kill me, but I want to do this because I want to get married.
That's
I said, dear
good.
God, if there's a woman that wants to marry you because you took a deadly drug to get that last 30 pounds, stay the hell away. Because you're going to be just ruined the rest of your life. But where do we get to this? This is another emasculation of men. Why the hell are you so worried? Now, if you go to the gym, that's fine. I don't want to tell people what to do. No. But, man, you shouldn't be obsessed with how your physical look is so much that you're thinking like a woman.
Yeah.
Women, that's the way women are obsessed with how their body looks, and maybe they shouldn't be so either.
It causes neuroticism. Yeah, they say, Jordan said, I mean, we can give Jordan his due on this. He said that being too self-aware or concerned with those things is synonymous with negative emotion.
Yeah.
Like you're going to feel like shit because it's never good enough. And there's tons of memes out there of gym bros complimenting gym bros and like not thinking their image is ever good enough. It's just like you said, you have to have balance here. Like you can't make just one thing your identity, because then you're like coveting. It's like a form of idolatry. Like I've noticed with friends, like you bring up seed oils, you see what happens, right? These are your friends and family. You talk to them about it. You show them information. It's a slower process than you think. Yeah. Like sometimes you'll have somebody who's like, really? Oh my God. But people are there's a lot of Homer Simpsons out there, bro.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of brokenness in the way we respond. There's a lot of men that are super smart that have tried getting things done and failed over and over again. And they hear that and then almost in their hearts are like, yeah, dude, I know it's true. But they're like, what are we going to do about it? Like it's
Oreos used to be made with lard and then they were changed to seed oils in 1997.
McDonald's fries, right?
Beef tallow. So technically, if you have Oreos with animal fat, that's a health food, especially if you're young. Yeah. If you're a kid and you haven't destroyed your thyroid yet from eating decades of seed oils. Mm-hmm. So there's a different rule set. I believe that kids should eat lots of sugar, healthy, good sugars, tons of fruit, tons of table sugar. All that stuff's fine when they're young, as long as they're not eating it with seed oils. Seed oils are what destroy your mitochondria, which is what makes it, you're unable to deal with sugar as you're naturally supposed to be able to.
Yeah,
but for folks who are so metabolically damaged from decades, I have found a little bit more like the keto and the carnivore approach to losing weight tends to be better for people who've been metabolically dysfunctional.
It's almost like a healing that goes on there.
Yeah, but then it's hard. There's a debate about that long term, but I don't want to go down.
Health is one of those things that I feel like you cannot you have to get in touch with and I think that we talked about this too, like the church has such a problem with understanding flesh. Like your body's not your flesh. Don't hurt your body because you think you're subduing the flesh in that way. But anything you want to say is
be like Tucker Carlson. Look what he's doing right now. He went over and interviewed Putin. He did what Jesus did when he went to dinner with Zacchaeus, the little tax collector. He went with the guy you're not supposed to hang out with, right? And he did something. That was an act of peacemaking.
Absolutely.
Tucker Carlson, and then he went to Dubai. And it was in a mostly Muslim, audience. And they were very staid and reserved. They don't clap a lot. But you know what I loved about that interview? So he went to do the Tucker.
That was live?
Yeah, he did
in front of an audience?
No, he did the interview with Putin in Russia. Then he went to Dubai.
Oh, okay.
And he toured Dubai, like on his little tour he was doing around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this conference, and this guy was interviewing him about his interview with Putin.
Gotcha.
And so there was a crowd of people in Dubai, and they're mostly Muslim. And he gave this long discussion about why he interviewed him, and long interview. And I thought it was cool because the one time where that crowd really did a big pop and started clapping for him big was when he said, look, I just want America to live out its own founding vision. Staying out of the affairs of other nations, being a beacon for liberty. And I thought he was talking about it in a Christian language. And those Muslims were clapping big, vociferously, like they wanted to believe that America was that Hulk Hogan they remembered from the 80s. You know what I mean? They wanted to believe in America. We're told that all these people hate us, but they still want to believe in the best of what we
That's
can
like
live
an
up
olive
to.
branch in and of itself, man. That's
They're like
awesome.
they were cheering on, like, yeah, we want the real America to show us how to do it. And they were begging for it. And Tucker was going into that. And I said, that's what it means to be a peacemaker. He's showing you what. Now, here's what you got to be. You got to be a Tucker in your own profession right now, because Tucker made a lot of money, but then he decided to start telling the truth. And now his career was a little bit shaken. Now, he did wait a little while until he became pretty big before he started going too hard. So there is that.
Yeah, he's
but
smart,
don't
dude.
wait for that. You got to do what you got to do right now in your profession, wherever you can, to be the Tucker, in order to take risks for the gospel revelation. You know, he's not talking mimetic theory.
I love that.
He'll learn about it one day and he'll love it. We'll have a great discussion with him.
I can't wait for that, bro.
But the point is that he is still living it because he's still making peace.
Yes, he is.
He could be making millions and sitting, but instead he's putting his life on the line because those guys are mean.
Well, I mean, it's hope. It's hope, bro. I mean, like, I think that, if I was a Muslim guy watching Tucker say that, I'd be like, he's a voice for at least a portion of America. Yeah. People listen to that guy. It'd be encouraging, dude. Yeah. I mean, like, and that stuff is happening.
It's revelatory because that's what all you need is. You don't need a majority. You need a sizable minority enlivened with the truth, quickened with the Holy Ghost community to do the things necessary to start healing their neighborhood. Start with your own life. Start with your own family.
And what would you
Heal
have?
yourself.
You'd have a very you wouldn't have to talk so much.
Yeah.
You'd have a very attractive example that everybody could point at and be like, wow, they're doing something right, dude.
We're going to have energy too cheap to meter. We're going to have anti-gravity.
Great
We're
stuff.
going to have cures for cancer that don't cost a thing. Cures for diabetes. We're going to heal all this stuff. And then they're going to say, how did you do it?
Yeah, and then you're not going to be consuming all that stuff. So the lobbying will stop. And then the big pharma stops. Like, it's a bottom-up thing. You're not more legislation for all these horrible companies is not going to fix it.
Only legislation we need is to get the church to have control over marriage contracts and the terms of the agreement.
I didn't know you felt that way. Honestly, we've been sort of we're just been uncovering this slowly, and I just feel like hearing that is just it's so good for my heart, because I'm like, David's there, and we were just thinking that, because our mind is, we've been feeling, and my brother says it's like firing rubber bullets at a tank for a long time. It's like, I don't like the sound of my own voice unless I'm saying something or doing something that's gonna do something, man. And you see so much of this mimesis with, like, our last podcast with a really cool guy. You interviewed Will Spencer, really cool guy. You guys talked about India and Japan.
India, Japan. Yeah. That was cool.
And we were talking about all these very conservative Christians are coming at the red pill community and just judging them. It's like a pearls before swine thing, and they've seen them as their enemy, and you see that bloodlust in their eyes, and it's like, dude, just stop. That's not the way you're supposed to. The animating spirit in you is pagan, bro. Yeah. It is not Christ. And so, we've been trying to discover that, and marriage is one of those things where, like, if we could get that in the church, I don't know how, with like all the Protestants, and I don't know how, but crazier things have happened. So I'm hopeful. Yeah. So what would you leave the listeners with, man? It's like
wherever you want to find me is fine, and my website's aneighborschoice.com, and I'm at David Gornoski on X, and we have our YouTube channel is deleted, but there's a backup channel that people have been putting content up, and supporters of our show have been putting up. So that's out there for YouTube people. We're on Rumble, and got a lot of exciting things coming up. Got an announcement about the future of my career coming up here.
Really?
Yeah. And be making it pretty soon here. Really excited.
Well, we're gonna be praying for you, man, and all you guys pray for David too. He's a warrior. He's in the trenches. He's picking out topics no one wants to talk about. And personally, you've helped me a lot. You know, in my walk, you've helped my brother and I, which has in turn helped our Bible study and introducing different perspectives. So I know God is using you. Yeah. And I'm praying for the absolute best for you.
Thank you. I just leave it with this: it's not the critic that counts, but the man in the arena. And we'll leave it there.
Chew on that, guys. Chew on that.